Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Weekly. I'm your host, Fred Cobb, Executive Vice President and CISO at Info Systems. With me today, Senior Cybersecurity Strategist Rob Ashcraft. Rob, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
As always, thank you for having me on another episode.
Absolutely. I particularly wanted Rob here today to talk about Critical Security Control number 17, which in our series, that's what we have made it to. So we're sliding into third base or rounding third base, however you want to say that, on covering all of the critical security controls for that make up the CIS 20. This particular one is near and dear to my heart. I spent several years as a certified trainer, training on a lot of technical courses for Microsoft. I just got into the whole idea. It wasn't necessarily cybersecurity related, but just doing training in general around technology. I've always had a passion for that. And we're going to be talking about the need for training around all the bad things that are happening out there, how to protect, how to secure the human. So, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about training in general, why it's so important for companies to make that an important part of what they're doing. So take it away.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think we all know the human factor. It can be your greatest weakness and vulnerability within your security program. However, it can also be your best defensive asset within your security program. So it's really around the security awareness and training. When we think first of security awareness training, we think about teaching our employees to understand the risks and the threats around an ever-evolving cyber world that we're part of. We think about making sure employees understand the consequences of failing to protect their organization from these kind of attacks. But I think it's important to step back, Fred, at maybe at a 30,000-foot view and really start by looking at every role in the organization, and like we did with access control and control number 14, control family 14. We're doing the same thing as looking at the roles, but this time we're looking at it from an aspect of what is mission critical to least critical as it pertains to business impact, access to sensitive information, overall security, and we're classifying them and then identifying what kind of knowledge do they need in terms of security awareness and security training, what sort of skills do they need, what abilities do they need to support the defense of the organization. And then we begin to develop and execute an integrated plan of training and testing every user kind of by their role classification or by their type. And from that, we can assess and identify gaps and remediate the gaps through policy or training or awareness programs. But I think it's good to back up a little bit and get a little higher view on what do we want to accomplish when it comes to security awareness training and take a little bigger view of it. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Yeah, in thinking about where training fits into the organization, you may be a company that does software development or programming. If you think about things like the open web or OWASP rules of securely coding, there's some training around there, on how to develop code that is less vulnerable to code that may have just blatant security flaws in it. And then you think about the integration of technology. Certainly, and we've talked about in previous episodes, where a lot of products come out of the box not very secure. So, training up on how to make specific technologies in the environment secure, not just that one time because you get creep over time, but you have to not only set them up initially in a secure way and harden them appropriately, but you have to maintain that hardened condition because over time, different variables can cause those systems to become less secure as new vulnerabilities are discovered or changes or upgrades into the network at large. So you think about the life cycle of the technology, but a big one is end user. Let's face it. It's the hardest thing that we do as security professionals is to secure the human being. We haven't implemented Skynet yet, so we still have humans involved in just about every aspect of what we do in the workforce, which that's kind of good because I'm a human as you are too, so we want to be relevant as long as we can be. But it's interesting that in spite of all the layers of security that we can tout, you can put in place, you can budget for, you can spend money on, that weak link is still the human. That's where training comes into play, wouldn't you say?
Yes, yeah, no doubt about it. And continuous training, right? It's not a one-time thing, but we're training on company policy. What is our company policies about the different ways that we conduct ourselves? Awareness skills, technical skills, as you mentioned, several. You could probably look at every area of the CIS 20, and there's technical skills that need to apply to certain people and roles within the organization. And then things like training on secure authentication, how to make sure they understand how to do that, right? Securely authenticate and use multi-factor authentication. Training on sensitive data handling, training on avoiding unintentional data exposure, identifying on how to identify social engineering attacks or phishing attacks or spoofing attacks and all the different things. And we can drill down into those. But, I think it's on the end user, we're looking at what are they going to be most susceptible to? What do they need to know? And then make sure the company is providing that training for that.
We'll be back with the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast after we pause for this special message. Security analysts believe cyber attacks will continue to escalate throughout 2020 and are recommending that every company, regardless of industry or size, place immediate focus on cybersecurity training and the tools that will protect you from these attacks. Did you know that you can book a cybersecurity assessment right now with Fred Cobb's team of cybersecurity engineers at InfoSystems? They will help you discover exactly where you are most vulnerable to a cyber attack and make recommendations on how to strengthen your defense in those areas. This is urgent. It's an issue that affects everyone in our community. Visit the InfoSystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your cybersecurity assessment. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah, there's some compliance mandates out there, whether it's industry specific, whether it's mandated by the federal government. Take HIPAA, as an example. If you're a covered entity or if you're a business associate supplying services to a covered entity where you may come into contact with protected health information, there are requirements to do periodic training and also have periodic security reminders around to bolster that training. Take the payment card industry, another example. If you are, depending on your merchant level, how many transactions you take credit card wise in a 12-month period, you may be required to do annual PCI training, and that comes all the way down to maybe the person working the cash register, in the store, that has to have some basic understanding of how to protect credit cards. It's not deep dive. It's not, hey, let's go off and read a gigantic book and come back and take an exam, but it's just the core, some of the basics, some of the common sense approaches to protecting that type of data. So, and there's certainly other circumstances where you're not talking about an industry mandate or a government mandate, but just in following good policy, you need to have that periodic training. Rob, can you talk a little bit about using simulated phishing as a training mechanism?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned in part of this, we want to be able to, harden the organization just like we would harden a device. And by doing that, so we're teaching users to identify different types of attacks that they might encounter. So simulated training, there's a lot of good services out there. This is something that can be done internally, or you can bring a third-party service that are already geared up and ready to do that, and have they're very effective at it. So, but you're looking for things like social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, even understanding what a spear phishing attack is, as opposed to as a type of phishing attack, or spoofing attacks, how to identify those different type of attacks, and then what to do about it. So it's not only identifying, but then, does the company have a process for reporting the incident or some type of mechanism in place for reporting incidents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important. And a lot of the, attacks, I've worked a couple of ransomware cases this week, either consulted on or done, follow-ups on, doing some of the, post-mortem type work on these types of events, which it's horrible for any company to have to experience that. But by and large, we continue to talk about it, but it continues to be a thing. As an example, just, 2 this week, and there'll probably be 1 or 2 next week that, one of us will be working related to either malware or, coming in via phish, an employee's clicking on either web link or they're opening up an attachment that they shouldn't be. And that can be avoided to a large degree if you condition your employees to be aware of those types of attacks. If someone's never told their employee, hey, if you get this weird link that says open these pictures now, or hey, click here, you've won $1,000, chances are you haven't, and chances are that's coming in on your corporate email or even your personal email, but chances are that could be a payload that's going to be delivered to your endpoint. When you click on that, that could be spreading a malware variant, could be spreading ransomware. It could be something bent on credential harvesting, where it's going to get your passwords, using passwords, and use that at a later date, to do something nefarious.
Yeah, and let's face it, the attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated. We're being a little simplistic here by design, just mentioning things that we used to see. But honestly, the phishing attacks and things that we're seeing with email and that, they look pretty legitimate these days. And users need to be trained properly in what to look for and understand, and so they can see that something's off. And if they're not sure, how to check it. I think another important part of that is we mentioned having a process or mechanism to report, internally. How do they report this? Do they send an email? What do they do? Is this process set up? And then is there a way internally that we test suspicious files or email payloads that we have a test environment set up that we can take a look at something that looks legitimate, but we're just not sure. So those are considerations, I think, that you want to have around security awareness.
Absolutely. Another thing to think about too, as we're talking about training, is when you are doling out the training. In other words, if you're creating training content or you're purchasing training content through some sort of online subscription, think about the attention span. I hate to say this, but it's true. Think about the attention span of the average employee. In other words, you're typically not going to set them down and say, okay, take this 2-hour security training course. However, if you're popping in and out throughout the year and you're firing a 4-minute course, a 5-minute course, maybe maximum a 10-minute course that has relevant content, they can relate to it. It's maybe geared toward what what they're doing, within their specific job or within the workplace. But keep it short, concise, to the point, and that type of training typically is absorbed better by your employees. Is that a fair statement?
No, I would say so. And I think breaking it down in pieces, I think it's also important to think about when to start. So I think the security awareness training, some of the basics need to start when they're onboarding employees, certainly understanding what company policy, what policies are in place, and they understand, what behavior is acceptable and what is not. And, some of the basics of security awareness and what to do. Certainly that should be part of the onboarding process. And then, as a starting point for employees that are already with the company, users of the company, just start off with the basics. And then I think you're right. I think, at least quarterly, have something new, something to continue on, because it is, things change for one thing. And so there's new types of threats, new things that are introduced that they want to be aware of. But I think it's just, keeping it on the radar.
Sure. So let's think about this. So you've got the human, which is, in spite of your technology spend, is still going to be your most vulnerable part of the equation. And attackers know this. That's the reason why they target with phishing. Sure. They target with other social engineering techniques. They use open source intelligence, things of that nature. So you've got your weakest link. You've got a very economical way typically to deliver training. And let's face it, training in general, these days when you're talking about these short bursts of training episodes that you can put together and you can send out via email or connect to this web link, whatever, and you can track it, make sure everybody's doing it, make it part of their performance reviews perhaps. That's a very cheap part of your overall security strategy, and it can pay off on orders of magnitude if you're consistent in providing the right type of training, the right mix of training to your employees.
Yeah. Well, I said this in the beginning. Your employees can be a major vulnerability, or they literally can become a human firewall, a defensive asset. I saw an interesting statistic. I use it sometimes. The Aberdeen group cited that effective security awareness training can reduce social engineering type of threats by 70%. And I would maybe even say that's a little higher than that, just based on what I've seen from effective security awareness training programs. It really tightens up the ship.
Yeah. For those of you that are interested in just looking at the types of attacks we're talking about that come through via phishing campaigns, in fact, it's unfortunate. This week I was reading an article, SANS, the huge InfoSec training organization, SANS. They disclosed in an article read yesterday that they were the victims of a phishing campaign. That one particular computer was compromised. That computer had lots of registration information about people that had registered for SANS training courses. Nothing like credit card information, they're saying in their disclosure statement, but still, this is a company that their specialty is providing info security training. Training is very important to the overall cybersecurity program that you're trying to create and maintain. Rob, any final thoughts before we leave this topic behind for the day?
No, I think we've hit a lot of this. Certainly a great start. Would encourage people to do some exploration online about security awareness training. There are some great organizations out there that provide that third party. We like a company called Know Before. I don't mind to say that on here. I think they've got an awesome program. We love it. We use it ourselves. We recommend it to our customers. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw that one out there. But I can't underscore. I know this is CIS number 17, but if it was me and I was making these, I would probably move it way up in the top 5 because security awareness training is that important to your organization.
No, I'm right there with you on that. We'll go ahead and close up shop for today. For those of you that have tuned in, thank you very much for listening to our talk on training. Please go back and review some of our previous episodes. If you haven't listened to them previously, we'll take you all the way so far from number 1 to number 17 as of the end of this one. So lots of good material in there. Hopefully you'll find a couple of nuggets amongst all that we've been saying throughout this series. And we're going to continue to finish out the last 3 controls in upcoming episodes and then move on to some, I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say better, but just other exciting topics. So we can't wait to deliver those to you. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.